Here we go. Thank you, Ricardo. Well, we are ready to start. So, welcome to the Skills USA Advantage session for our wonderful Skills USA advisors. And today we are going to unpack what is it about Skills USA that makes us so special and makes all the difference in students' lives as a CTSO. So we have a couple of great experts and guests that are going to give us that knowledge so we leave informed and ready to go to implement everything that Skills USA Advantage can do for us. We have Dr. Ricardo Romaníos, our Chief Diversity Officer, today with us, and we have Grace Smith, our National Officer and Skills USA High School President, that are joining us today. So I'll give it over to you, Ricardo. I'll keep admitting advisors as we go, but just to tell you, we are so grateful to have you here and to have the expertise today to make sure that our Skills USA advisors are ready to go.
Very good. Welcome, everybody. And I certainly will introduce myself here in a second, but I want to pass it over to Grace to let Grace introduce themselves, and then we'll jump in.
Hello, everyone. So my name is Grace Smith, and I'm currently a senior at Alma High School in Washington State this year. I'm studying in the early childhood education program and looking at pursuing my education next year at Western Washington University to dual major in behavioral neuroscience and communications. Had a blast this year and am super excited to continue to serve as our SkillsUSA National High School President.
Very good. And very big thanks to Grace for joining us today so that Grace can provide her perspective on this and certainly elaborate on all the things that we're going to be talking about through the Skills USA Advantage report. And we're going to get into a little bit more as to why and what we're modeling through that. But you know, I've enjoyed very much preparing with Grace and working with Grace through the work group, the DI work group. So y'all are in for a treat very much today. Shelley was planning on being here with us today to kick this off and kind of set the stage. But as life happens on the road, technology did not work for us. And so no doubt she sends her regards and sends her thanks for you being here and taking the time today to learn a little bit more about Skills USA. Before we jump, rather the Advantage report, not Skills USA, I think before we jump into the content of the report and give you some of what's being offered up in the report, and I've got my coffee here with me, I think it's important to set some of the context as to why this is, I think, a powerful new tool for you, for all of us as we start moving the ball forward in career and tech ed. So I hope you see at the end of today's webinar, you come to see this as a really powerful tool for you to really start sharing more than you already do now, but more the powerful part of a CTE experience. This report is giving us some really clear data and really compelling data to share with folks that are not necessarily connected with Skills USA or not necessarily connected with the opportunity that is available through career and tech ed. So this report really advances our understanding. So many of us have all these wonderful stories, and Grace is going to share her story as we get into this, but we all have our stories of the impact that Skills USA has. This report gives us the data, gives us a national picture as to what's going on in Skills USA, and that really is a wonderful advancement in this. So I hope you see this by the end of today. How can you take that story, craft it for your context, and start sharing it with your folks? And so I think as Skills USA advisors, that's really what we hope out of this. How can you take this information, overlay your local story, and really start utilizing it to share with educational leadership, with parents in your community, with business partners, community-based organizations, those who are already connected with schools? Use this resource and really start connecting people that don't know about career and tech ed, that don't know about Skills USA. And it'll, I think, significantly amplify what we can do through that. So that's kind of what we're hoping for today. We have time at the end of our webinar, after we do some sharing, to do some Q&A, right, Carolina? We've got time for that, and some other goodies that we're going to share at the end. You will leave today through an email after the fact. You will leave today with 2 resources, those reports, and you'll also leave with a PowerPoint deck that you can use and modify to suit your needs. Okay. So with that, let's jump into the SkillsUSA Advantage report. So SkillsUSA worked with the Student Research Foundation in 2021 and surveyed many students to kind of get some information about career and tech ed and their experiences as part of a CTE classroom. This report tells us that when we look at SkillsUSA, SkillsUSA members, when we look across gender, we look across race, we look across socioeconomic status, the data tells us very clearly and in very nice terms that the outcomes are greatly advanced, are improved for students in a CTE classroom that are part of SkillsUSA, as opposed to students who are in a CTE classroom that are not in a CTSO. So that's what this report looks at. We look at student responses. There we go. We're looking at student responses and comparing those students who identified as a SkillsUSA member and those students who are in a CTE classroom but are not part of a CTSO. Those are our 2 groups here, and that's what we're looking at through this report. So I want you to know, importantly, that this data was collected in the fall of 2021, and the Student Research Foundation collected 27,000 responses. So this is a large subset, y'all. There's a lot of students that participated in this survey. Of that larger survey, then 1,600 students identified as SkillsUSA members. So this is, I feel, a representative sample of students. It's a large enough sample for us to do some of the comparative analysis that we're going to offer up. And we also know that this sample is representative across regions of the US. We've got every subset of the US represented. So when we further break apart that sample, we also see representation across gender and race and ethnicity. I couch these terms with giving you some of this so that you feel comfortable in sharing this data. You know that this is pulling from a large data set. This isn't pulling from a sample of 30 students. This is something that we feel confident in, and certainly resonates with what other reports have shown in the past and what we know about SkillsUSA. So this report in the survey then asks students about their experience as a CTE student. And in the report, you're going to see kind of 2 fields of questioning. One of them is around career clarity. Career clarity asks students what their plans were upon graduation. And there were 2 markers in this. The one that we're going to look at a lot today is persistence. Essentially, they asked students, and this is reported out for 12th grade students, what was their intention upon graduation? Were they intending to persist and continue on in a career or further education that aligned with the CTE pathway they had been studying in their high school or their tech center? So you can imagine this is a rather high threshold. We're talking about 12th grade students now that have said, I'm going to go and get a career, or I'm going to get a job, I'm going to go get a certificate in this pathway that I've been following for the last 2, 3, 4 years. That's that persistence threshold. Direction said, okay, if students said no, that they were not planning to persist. Direction asked, did you at least have a clearer sense of your career pathway? So it's a little bit lower threshold. Do you feel like you have a clearer idea of where you're going? We're going to focus in today on persistence, but both of those data sets are in that report that you're going to be able to pull down. So if we know that you intend to pursue this career, maybe why is that? What's happening as a result of you participating in this CTE pathway, this CTE classroom? And so the Student Research Foundation worked with several professionals in the CTE ecosystem, and this list of general outcomes were developed. So they went to these researchers, these educators, and they said, what would we want to see as a result of a student that has participated in this pipeline? And they came up with these general outcomes. A student feels more excited about school as a result of being in a CTE classroom. Or maybe they had firsthand work experience as a result of being in the CTE pathway. Or they're more excited about their chosen career. So this report asks students to self-identify whether they were more likely to feel this way, less likely to feel this way, and those reports were those numbers were then tabulated, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. So let's dive into it. Let's talk about career clarity then. SkillsUSA members were almost 2 times more likely to report that they were planning to pursue a career in the CTE field that they were studying in high school upon graduation. What does that look like? So here's this first data that I want to offer up to you. In this green color, you see students that identified as a SkillsUSA member. In the blue, you've got all students that identified as a CTSO non-member. So they're in the CTE pathway, but they're not part of a CTSO program. When we take those two groups and we put them next to each other, you start to see some big differences. Thus, the SkillsUSA advantage. What's that bump that we're seeing as a result of a student that has been a member of SkillsUSA within their CTE program? We're seeing that only 35% of students that aren't part of a CTSO are planning on persisting into that career field versus 63%. That's a big jump. That's a big difference that we're starting to see. And what we're going to see a little bit later on is that difference holds when we look at gender. That difference holds when we look at the socioeconomic status of the school. This is powerful information. And it continues what we know from previous reports about the effect of being a SkillsUSA member, that our members continue on. They persist into that career field. Again, the direction threshold was a lot lower. Those were students that said, I may not be planning to persist into that career, but I have greater clarity on where I'm going. So you can see, rightfully so, that this is a larger subset of students. 90% of our students identify as having more clarity, which I think is a great outcome as a result of being in CTE. We also see that 74% of students that aren't part of CTSO also identify that. So we're seeing some nice outcomes. Well, why is that? That's where the Advantage report then tries to untangle why. What are some of the things that are happening as a result of being in a CTE classroom that are leading to the outcomes that we get? And that's where we looked at those 7 general outcomes, such as earning a license certificate. So when we look at the data, we look at the difference between those who identified as SkillsUSA members and those that identified as non-members. We see that students report far greater access to expanded opportunities in CTE and dramatically improved career readiness. So let's look at those data. across the board, we see that when a CTE student is a part of SkillsUSA, they're more likely to report that they've received these outcomes as compared to students that are not a part of a CTSO. If we look at work experience, we see 82% that were part of SkillsUSA had that outcome. They had work experience. They had the opportunity to meet potential employers. One that's important for me, and we're going to talk a little bit more about, is excitement about school. Excitement about school, for me, starts to elicit what we've been collecting as a national network of schools talking about at-risk behavior. Are students more at risk or less at risk? We know that by connecting students to clubs, school experiences, we reduce at risk. And we're seeing that here. We see that students are more excited about school when they're a member of SkillsUSA. And that is a tremendous outcome. We've got schools all across the US implementing interventions purposely designed to increase engagement, increase excitement, increase connectedness in schools. What we're seeing here is that SkillsUSA does exactly that as well. So I want to invite Grace into the conversation because we want to talk about 3 of these. And we're going to offer up some more data here in a little bit where we disentangle this. But this idea of persistence, this idea of excitement and clarity and work experience. And so, Grace, I want to call you into the conversation and get your take on what we've been discussing thus far. You know, you've been a part of SkillsUSA now for several years. You're a leader in the community. When you look at this data and when you look at what we're talking about here, what's coming up for you? What have you experienced as being a member of SkillsUSA?
Yeah, so I feel like the biggest difference in my life, as I mentioned earlier, I'm studying in the early childhood education program, and that's definitely where I plan to graduate and then pursue my career in. But that started back my freshman year. So I've been involved in CTE since my 7th grade year, but not necessarily CTSO until my freshman year.
Mm-hmm.
And I walked into, we had a careers connection class that we all had to take. And I remember, like, on the first day of high school, they had us answer this question, which was the first time this question had ever been asked of me. And it was, Grace, how do you want to impact the world with the skills and passions that you already have? The question I'd been receiving like my whole life was, Grace, what do you want to be when you grow up? And that was so like narrow-minded focus of like, you're going to have this career, this is going to be it.
Mm-hmm.
But in this class, we spent a semester taking personal interest quizzes and then going over assessments of our own skills and then what we were like uniquely had passions for. And in that, I'm going to say, I know we have a lot of educators on the call, but I came to this sad realization that I really loved teaching and that I naturally had some gifts in that area. I say sad because I'm actually the daughter of 2 teachers. And my 7th grade year, I was told that teachers breed teachers. So stubbornly, I was like, no, I'm going to break that. And that will not be my life story. So I was like, darn. But I decided that year to get more involved in our CTSOs, and from there found some leadership positions. And again, those teaching skills and facilitation skills kept popping up. And I actually found a lot of passion and fulfillment in that. So from the gentle nudges of my advisors, I continued to pursue down that route. And I've now spent the last 3 years doing some career research. And while I know I don't want to be in the classroom as an actual educator, I want to pursue higher education to understand the neural development of a child and then use that information to then educate our educators on how to best meet the needs of our students. And that all happened because I had those out of classroom experiences. So I was a freshman at the start of COVID, which compared to a lot of my other students, they just ended up having online classes and kind of stayed very disengaged from school. And it's honestly, we're still seeing, even now as seniors, it's hard to get them re-engaged. But my freshman year, there was a group of 7 of us students, and we just happened to be in this careers class. And from there, our advisor kept us very engaged throughout the first 3 months of online. And then coming back my sophomore year, they had us take on some online chapter leadership roles and then still compete virtually. And I know that we now have become like a little peer group, and they're actually my closest friends now. Like, we hang out in and outside of school. So I'm definitely way more excited to be in the classroom with them now, but they also definitely push me to continue to be better in those areas. We're all studying different things, but because we had an advisor that kept us close and engaged in school throughout the pandemic, we all have pretty set career pathways that we're going to take, and I would say the skills to help us do well in those.
That's really great. And it definitely seems like, I mean, you're highlighting so many of the things that are being named in this report. You've been given the opportunity to get further engaged in not only what you're studying, but I think, a narrative that we hear a lot, the ability to be in leadership, the ability to be engaged with our peers really draws out other experiences and new learnings, those skills that we talk about so much in Skills USA. It really seems like that really came to light for you as a part of being a member in the organization.
Yeah, and like I said, there wasn't a lot going on my sophomore year, but a lot of our Skills USA stuff, I ended up running for state office that year, and we still had multiple different online leadership trainings. And then from there, it kind of branched off, and we had a couple of like outside industry people that led some of those like professional development trainings for us. And so even throughout the summer, I ended up job shadowing at a local hospital, not really medical related, but I was able to do, like, it was a technology intern. And so I just helped, I facilitated a couple classes on setting up telehealth portals for students. And so that was definitely an interesting experience, and it just like snowballed, and it just kept building on it. And by my senior year, I have a lot of unique experiences to tack onto a resume, but also kind of uniquely made me who I am now as a student.
And so would you attribute that entirely, well, not entirely, but in large part to your participation in Skills USA? I guess when you look at your peer group that aren't part of a CTSO necessarily, what are you seeing as you think about their engagement in the CT class and what they've been privy to as a student?
Yeah, I mean, definitely not entirely. I'll say there's some things from my parents and different other people that have built into me, but probably say the biggest difference between the peers that I have in a CTSO and then some of our friends that aren't engaged in a CTSO is the work ethic. We didn't necessarily just have the like sign off card of, oh, it's okay as long as you're passing your classes freshman year. Our advisors still kept us accountable that you're going to be not just workers in an industry, but you're going to be leaders in an industry. And so they made sure that we still did above and beyond of what was expected of us. And so that, I don't think that my work ethic kind of slacked off, which is what definitely we're seeing some of our other seniors struggle with this year. So moving forward in my career, definitely figured out how to advocate for myself in that sense, and then continue to build in that skill set.
That's great. And I hear so much in that I really appreciate the fact that you've got that agency and the ability to advocate for yourself and really starting to see where you're going. I think that, to me, is a really powerful outcome as a result of being a Skills USA member. And it lifts me up to hear you talk about that. Certainly, folks, when we get to the question and answer part, I'm sure that we can dive a little bit more into all that you offered up, Grace. And so let's then keep on teasing it out. So when we look at these outcomes, we named in this that one of the really important parts of this report is that really, in really important ways, we were able to use this survey and start disentangling and seeing how this data held up when we looked across different identity groups. And that for me was a really important outcome through this survey. So the Student Research Foundation collected demographic information. We were also able to tie into, based off of the school and the economic indicator for that campus, we're able to look at gender, we're able to look at race, ethnicity, we're able to look at socioeconomic status. More importantly, we're able to do some cross tabulations as well. Now, some of these data are certainly limited by the sample size that we have. And so we don't have accessible every certainly cross tabulation that has been collected. Again, you're going to find more inside of the actual Advantage report. But let's look at persistence. What does it look like? Again, this is where we said to you that students are intending to pursue a career in what they've been studying. If I look at girls, if I look at boys, if I look at that cross tabulation, I look at young Latinas, or I look at young white men and boys, or if I look at Title I campuses, we still see demonstrable improvement, significant advantage by participating in SkillsUSA. 60% versus 33%, 71% versus 36%. And I think certainly, this gives us pause as always. It identifies further gaps that the organization is going to continue to work on and identify how can we start remedying some of those, because that benefit isn't necessarily the same across every demographic group. Again, a conversation as you dive further into the data. But advisors, when we talk about bringing more students into SkillsUSA, when we talk about the diversity of students that are in our communities and bringing them into career and tech ed, we're seeing that the outcomes are there. We know that every student that participates in SkillsUSA is receiving that advantage. And that is something to really tout and share with educational leaders, employers. And I know for a fact that our business partners at the national level are absolutely seeing what they want, what they need to see in this data. So we talked about persistence. Let's focus on excitement. Excitement about school. Grace, and what you were sharing in terms of what you talked about, I hear excitement. I hear engagement. I hear you being more connected as a result of doing this, and that's a really great thing. So SkillsUSA members are more excited. When I look at girls, when I look at boys, we're seeing that across cohorts, when a girl is in SkillsUSA versus a girl that is not a part of a CTSO, we see an advantage, we see a bump. Again, we're seeing a little bit of a difference, that the bump isn't necessarily as great when we look at girls versus boys. That's something for sure that we're going to start looking at and diving into more as we move forward from this new baseline. Suffice it to say, when we disentangle these numbers and we start pulling them out and disaggregate across groups, it isn't just enough that we have this advantage as a whole. It's important, and now we see, when we talk about the stories of SkillsUSA, that it holds for all student groups that are participating in CTE and all student groups that then join on and participate in SkillsUSA. So the SkillsUSA Advantage report actually ends then with this idea. And it's at the heart of what SkillsUSA is doing around equity and inclusion. If we see this advantage as being a part of SkillsUSA, if we see this bump, then it's incumbent upon us. How can we get more students participating in the goodness that you have going on in your classroom as a SkillsUSA advisor? So part of the solution that SkillsUSA is offering, when we talk about the CTE ecosystem and we talk about education, and closing gaps between communities, we see that SkillsUSA is one of those solutions. And so thus, how can we get more students participating in this? How can we bring more students into the fold? And that's really what this is all about. How can we take this call to action? How can we take this resource and share it out? And so when we provide this resource to you, you're going to get two versions, right, Carolina? You're going to get the full report. She's nodding yes. You're going to get the full report, which is what I'm holding up for you. You're also going to get a 2-page report that distills it down in a quicker read, but gives you all the highlights. Number one, we want to share this with you so you know about the wonderful work that you're doing. We know that these outcomes are present because of your leadership in the classroom. That because of your tenacity in being an advisor on the local level, we know that these results exist. And so how can we equip you to further share that, further substantiate what you're doing? Every education leader out there is asking, why are we doing what we're doing? And always reassessing whether we continue doing that or not. We want you to have the ammunition, number one, to substantiate why you do what you do. But number two, substantiate why we need more students participating in this, why we need more teachers in the fold as being a SkillsUSA advisor. And we also want to be able to share this with partners on the local level, more parents. If we can convince more parents about why CTE is a fantastic pathway, then more students will be joining us. So we want to give you that. And so that's what our call to action is. And Grace, actually, I'm going to put you on the spot because I know that you spent some time in Washington where you had the opportunity to talk about this. Why don't you share with us the conversations that you had in DC and some of the reception that you had as a result of sharing it?
Yes, so for SkillsUSA Week, us as national officers, we went and shared this. We went to the Department of Education and met with Amy Lloyd, the Assistant Secretary to the DOE. And while this is kind of their whole world, right, education and how do we better provide that to students, when we shared this information with them, and specifically the statistics about it, they were definitely opened to kind of the story behind every SkillsUSA student's success, and that this is not just like a random thing, that this is consistent across the board, that all students, regardless of their background, were benefiting from that. And we as 7 students representing the nation at large, we all individually shared our stories and the advantage that we have had through SkillsUSA. And each one of them, she was so surprised, but also not surprised, because we gave her that information and it was kind of expectant of what are these students' success stories going to be? And so she was just really excited to then bring that back to some of her fellow colleagues and really say that, like, well, I have this information, but I also have these 7 stories that were really cool. And then we also individually all met with and hoped to meet with our senators, but most of us ended up meeting with some aides to our senators. And I know I met with an aide for Senator Maria Cantwell, and he had no idea what CTE or SkillsUSA really was. And so it was cool to be able to share that information with him. And I'm going to guess he wasn't that far out of school, because he had funny things to say about his high school experience, and that, like, if I would have known that, I definitely would have done that. And yeah, that's definitely makes sense why you would want students engaged in that. And so from having absolutely no context to within 15 minutes being able to say, yeah, I would want my student engaged. And that was a cool little testimony to see pan out right before our eyes. And then that continued some of the conversations throughout it. We're hoping to get either Amy Lloyd or one of her representatives to come to nationals. We've been talking to her over the last couple of weeks. And so it's just continuing that conversation. But again, they were expectant of our success stories because they knew that we all were in SkillsUSA, and they had just really seen the numbers of that. And it was a cool opportunity to have them excited about us, but also invested in the future of continuing this benefit. How do we continue to see students year after year still have the same clarity for their careers so that we have better prepared employees within our workforce?
That's great. That's really cool. I really enjoyed that story about how you took this representative, this aide, from a place of not knowing at all about CTE and Skills USA to a place of really engaged and seeing the power through this resource. That must have been extremely gratifying.
Yes, it was.
And that's a story, you know, y'all, we keep on hearing this. This resource, when we get it in front of folks, when we get it in front of business leaders, we get it in front of other educators, they get excited. It isn't just about it ceases to be a one-off story. It ceases to be just about, okay, this is Grace. Grace is great. She's fantastic. But this is just one story. It ceases to be that, and it becomes now a national narrative. And it now gets categorized in the same way that we categorize all high impact research-based strategies that educators are really looking for. And that's what we want to offer them up. Because I think what you offered then secondarily to that is, when you combine this new data set with your story, you have a really powerful storyline. You have a really powerful tool. And that's why we wanted to offer up today in this way. When you receive these materials, what we want to offer up to you is, how can you find the students there within your classroom, within your school or your community that illustrate, that embody these advantages? They're more excited. They've had more work experience. They plan to persist. Combine that story with these data, offer that up as a cohesive marketing tool, if you will. And now we have that clear and compelling story that will convince folks of the power of career and tech ed and of Skills USA. And that's ultimately what our call to action is. Take these resources, combine it with your stories that you receive every day, and share them. Share them with folks so they know about the power of Skills USA, know about the power of what you're doing in the classroom, and lift it up because people are absolutely paying attention and they are absolutely turning on to the power of Skills USA. So with that, I think we've talked certainly enough about the report. How about we do some Q&A? And we can go back and talk about anything in particular from the report, but Carolina, I'll turn it over to you for the Q&A.
Absolutely, everybody. So we are open to any questions to either Grace or Ricardo, who are on the call with us, about how they would see that they will utilize the report, what prompted them to create it, and anything that comes up to your mind, best to our abilities, we will be able to hopefully address. So we are opening it up. Go ahead and drop in the chat what comes to your mind. If there is not a question, there is a comment, there is a food for thought type of sentence, we are open to reading those as well. Go ahead, Keith. I see your you got your hand up.
Greetings. So I'm trying to get as much information about all of this so that we can get this program reinvigorated in our state. I'm from Alaska, and I want to be able to show them after high school data. Do you guys have any graduation or post-secondary data that is that your availability, or is that, I know that's difficult in most states, but is there anything that you have that I would be able to share with our legislators?
Certainly, Keith, that is a question that is being replicated by most folks, and that's what we want to see. And having been part of a school system myself, that was something that we wanted to see. As part of this report, we don't have anything that tracks that any further. That is certainly a deficiency or something that isn't connected into this report. That is something, however, that SkillsUSA is absolutely focused in on. How can we structure our data systems to start collecting that longitudinal data? I know that we've got some folks from the education department also on the line, so I don't know if they want to speak to that in particular. So in brevity's sake, as part of this report, no. As part of an overall plan of attack, it is something that we are looking for. How can we collect that data to then offer it back to you?
Thank you, Ricardo, and thank you, Keith, for that question. We have another question in the chat here from Harold Casey from Maine. Is there a way to aggregate the data that might be more beneficial for our states?
Yeah, Harold, do you want to tell me a little bit more, unpack that for me and see if I can help?
Okay, for our state, we're a lot, unfortunately, I hate to say it, we're a very heavily white state.
Sure.
A Caucasian state, as well as Native American state. So some of the other pieces in regards to Latinos or African American stuff don't pertain as much to our state. So when I look at those data and some of the things you showed us, and I have no problem with anything. It's just some of that doesn't pertain to our state.
Sure. So in other words, if I'm going to reflect this back to how can we craft this to be a SkillsUSA report just to your data set, to your state necessarily?
Correct.
I don't know. That's a question that I'm going to have to go back to the Student Research Foundation and see. It's going to be entirely dependent upon the number of data that we received from each state. So I will write it down, and certainly I'll ping you after this so that we could talk about that and see what we find.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a valid question, and so the reason we don't necessarily, so the reason why we don't disaggregate the data based off of Native American students would be coming down to sample size, not that it would be the inability to make any kind of generalization simply because we don't have the cases and the numbers to be able to substantiate that.
Thank you, Ricardo. I have a question for our advisors on the call, if you all don't mind. What was the one piece of data? And there was a ton of data that we shared, right? Ricardo went over it so comprehensively and added the experiential piece with Grace, who really can speak to the advantage. But if you were to name something that surprised you, or something that was like an aha moment for you, or something that you know that you're going to close the Zoom webinar and you're like, this is something that I remembered and I think I'm going to share, what would that be? Was there anything that kind of just where it was like an aha moment to you as an advisor when you think about your classroom, when you think about your chapter, when you think about your school district?
Well, Carolina, I'll share with you, here in the district, most of our chapters have memberships who is all Black and Brown students. And so, but most of our sponsors are not of the same ethnicity. So being able to share this data, and we're a Title I school, a Title I district, really all the schools in there are Title I district. So being able to have this information to share out, to show the importance of SkillsUSA and the CTE programs would be great. In fact, we just had part of our state competition, and a couple of the judges, after hearing some of the stories from the kids and all, they were trying to find ways of how to support them to be better at, what they're doing. And so having this type of information will be a great advantage to me to be able to say, aha, here's why we feel that Skills USA is so important to our scholars.
Thank you so much, Carlita. That is a very valid perspective, right? Especially just to give background on this District of Columbia that we're talking about, and what an interesting perspective. Thank you. I think we have a couple of more things in the chat here as well.
Hey, Caroline, while there's dead air, I'll jump in here. So I know, I'm not sure about every single state, but I know in Illinois we have Perkins measurements that we have that we're all hit on. And I mean, this just takes another layer and dives deeper into that. So I know, like, as a school district, we've got to put that out to the public and that on there. You know, if we're being measured for something, that solution is definitely, as an administrator, like, that's the next thing. What kind of solutions do you have for this? And if this can answer some of those areas and those problematic areas that we have, boom, right here it is.
That's
Dallas.
spot on.
Yeah, 100%. Thanks for putting the ball on the tee so that we can kind of tee that off, because we're not speaking to that specifically here, but I'm going to say it really because you offered it up. Folks, I mean, as we're going through the comprehensive local needs assessment in every LEA and every college and 2-year across the US and frankly also the states too, we're seeing the data. We're seeing that we've got gaps, and these gaps have been persistent for a long time. What I'm basically, and what Skills USA is offering up to you here, is there are a lot of solutions out in the research to meet what Perkins asked for, those root causes. If I'm going to get students more connected to career and tech ed and increase persistence, i.e. decrease attrition, we're offering you a solution. This data is telling you that this is a solution that can help get students more engaged. And so absolutely, I would be naming that. It is one of the federally, we're one of the federally recognized CTSOs, and it is absolutely something available for funding under Perkins 5. So Dallas, spot on.
And we are seeing a lot of activity here in the chat. So if you are not able to follow up, I was using the dead air to just read a little bit about those wonderful comments, but thank you so much. Is it Dallas Terry or Terry Dallas? What's the first name? What's the last name?
Dallas is my first name, and that happens all the time.
Wonderful. So thank you so much, Dallas. And really, like, I think every time we create a Skills USA video or we are creating a wholesome Skills USA message, we always like to look at Skills USA as a solution, right? I've heard it so many times. Skills USA is a solution. And it's sometimes the trick of it is, what are we solving? What is the question that we're giving the solution to? So this is really, really important feedback that you've all talked about. But in the chat, I saw a lot of praise and a lot of enthusiasm about what Grace said. Grace, would you mind just unmuting and telling us a little bit more about something that you dropped in the chat that caused such enthusiasm?
Yeah, I think it was in response to originally when I shared that question that was asked of me. So I'll reshare it with you all. I was asked to really identify and then outline how I wanted to impact the world with the skills and passions that I had, rather than just what I wanted to be when I grew up. So I feel like a lot of it was, what's going to be your exact career path, and like, what are you going to be, versus now I have like, these are stops along the path that I know I want to make and that'll help benefit it. And so it's way less just like linear thinking and more like, okay, so it doesn't have to be exactly A, B, C, and D. There's other ways to accomplish it, but I know which way I'm going. And then ultimately I know why I'm doing it, which will probably be more beneficial in the long run than just knowing how I need to do it. Because then when it gets hard, because I'm sure it will, I have that original answer of the impact that I want to have on the world behind me. So.
Wow, I am just so happy that Grace is with us on the call, everybody, because she is just a living and breathing example of that Skills USA Advantage is the way that she can articulate what that does to her and how effective it is. I think we can all agree it's just incredible. So everybody, I am going to move on to our final piece. Feel free to drop in the chat everything. We're trying to keep up with all the goodness that you're sharing here. But I am going, if I could ask you, Ricardo, to stop sharing, thank you. And I will share a QR code to our evaluation. And also, I am dropping it in the chat as well. Just a second. Just the link. But feel free to scan it because your evaluation will give you access to all of our resources, the ones that Ricardo mentioned. I am going to be sending an email to everybody that fills it out tomorrow. And also, we are going to put you in a raffle because I have some super exciting things to share with you. 3 of us are going to walk out with things that they didn't have before. So let's take about 5 minutes. Let me know, does everybody have access to the evaluation? Show me a thumbs up. If it's all good, great. Thank you so much, Karen. It is really interesting, right? It's like the best thing that you can talk about when you think about Skills USA. How is the difference really being made in the lives of our students and also our advisors, because they are the ones really boots on the ground connecting us to this change. I cannot be more grateful for the crowd that gathered here today, the teachers, the administrators that really care about Skills USA mission. So let's take about, I would say, 3 minutes to complete. The evaluation is very short. And then I will take the names from it and I'll throw it in this wheel of fortune and we'll see who's walking out with extra stuff today. I'm going to stop sharing. Kim, Kim Miller, would you mind elaborating to present it better? Do you mean, is there maybe the PD, maybe the slides will be helpful for that we're going to follow up with? So let's take. I see only a couple of responses. Do we have, I don't know what's going on. Okay. All right, let's take, okay. Let's take 2 more minutes. If you need me to drop it in the chat again, I can.
So Kim, your question is specifically around getting students engaged in this.
No worries, we have time, Jess. I said we have 1 more minute to fill it out. And yes, I think Kim answered in the chat box that the slide deck was something that she was hoping for. So very, very helpful.
Yeah. And while everybody's filling out the evaluation, I went ahead and put up the contact information. If you have more, if you have any other requests or have any questions about the report itself, need help substantiating it to anybody, by all means, there's our contact information, and Shelly or myself will be glad to support you on that. I'll go ahead and pull down the screen now for you.
Yeah, we're just giving each other, because I see those evaluations are pouring in. We got about 43 completed, and we have 70, over 70 folks on the call, some of them national staff, so I guess they're not completing. But mostly we're just waiting for our advisors. We don't want to rush you all, but we also do want to be mindful of your time, and we want to give away the fun stuff. So in the meantime, I'm going to show us, we are still waiting for some of, I see some are being completed. I will tell you, what is it that we're going to be trying to win in our raffle. So the third prize is the wonderful red SkillsUSA hoodie. Can we all see it on the screen?
Yes.
The second prize, we have the laptop backpack, of course, SkillsUSA logo. And the main prize is somebody's going shopping to Lowe's for $50 for some spring renovation things, or maybe to your garden, whatnot. You can go crazy. So those are our three prizes. And all right, let me see who has completed. Let's close our evaluation time. All right.
They weren't expecting Lowe's gift cards.
I know, now they're filling out so quickly. Okay. So I am going to share again. Let me one more click. If there's anybody who completed late, 3, 2, 1, last click. Okay. I am going to share my screen, and let's see. Can you all see the wheel? Wonderful. All right. We have our entries, and I am clicking to spin. We'll see who wins the hoodie. It is Lisa. Lisa, no last name. Lisa, can you unmute and say hello? Hello,
Hi.
Lisa. Hi, Lisa. It's Lisa, last name?
Means.
Lisa Means. All right, Lisa, I'll be in touch with you for your size and your shipping.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Alrighty. Okay, are we ready for our backpack winner? So Lisa is getting the red hoodie. Oh. And the backpack goes to Michael Bitts. Michael, are you here? Michael, are you here? Michael Bitts? I would say if you're not here.
Michael's here. Mike isn't working. They texted in the chat
Oh,
box.
okay. Good, Michael. I was about to take that backpack away from you. Sorry, but you're here.
Must be present to
You're
win.
getting the backpack. You're getting the backpack. All right. So are we ready for the Lowe's gift card? I want to hear spin that wheel, Carolina. Spin that wheel. Let's do it. All right. And the Lowe's gift card. Brian. Brian, are you here with us? Hello, Brian.
Yes.
Yes,
The
he
message
is.
in the chat.
Wonderful. Well, Brian, have a great time shopping in Lowe's. I will reach out to you all with your information so we can get you your giveaways shipped. And everybody, thank you so much. Ricardo, I'll turn it over to you for some closing remarks, and we're going to close the meeting and have a great afternoon.
No, I want to thank everybody for showing up today and learning about the SkillsUSA Advantage. Please utilize those resources. Let us know what else you need. We're here to help you advocate for your program and spread the word of Skills USA. And we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Appreciate your time. And Grace, everybody, let's give some snaps and some claps and some emoji reactions to Grace for being here and presenting.
Thank you so much, Ricardo and Grace. It's always a pleasure having you. To each and every Skills USA advisors, you all are rock stars. Thank you for such a great turn up. And I hope that you all have a great afternoon, and then the resources and all the information is going to be super useful for you. Goodbye.